another important assignment, he delegated me alongside the Honorable Commissioner of Information and Communication and his Special Advisor on Media to represent him in this very auspicious and important event. Let me preface my speech, or his speech, with this observation that you've had the various jobs and works that he has done in his career, but I want to assure you that the one that he's most proud of is that of being a journalist. And every time actually he does something nice and we commend him for that, he says he attributes it to some of the values that he acquired during his stint as a journalist. And I'm happy to say that one of his friends and boss at that time in the early 80s was Chief Emmanuel Agu, who is here with us. And ever since, that friendship has endured up till today. He worked with him while he was in the FCT, and even today as a governor, Emma Agu has been one of the closest people to the governor, which tells you a lot about some of the values actually that this noble profession of journalism is instilled in its members. And I equally want to say that in 2019, when he invited me to be his commissioner, we've never met. But as a journalist, he was following my progress since my days in the university, my time in the US, and how I was actually a vociferous critic of his boss, President Goodluck Jonathan. I was all over the media at that time, and when he invited me, actually I thought he invited me to reprimand me or something. But when I came, he said, I want you to join my team when I become the governor. He won the election by then. And I told him, sir, are you watching TV or listening to radio? He said, yes. He said, I have been criticizing your government when you were a minister in Jonathan's administration. He said, well, I didn't invite you because we share a political party, but because I knew that there's something you can contribute towards development. That is the kind of person he is. Another case study of recent, this year actually, he invited Shehu. He was working with DW, and he invited me to come back to Bauchi and serve the state as his Commissioner of Information. So I'm very proud of my boss for not only headhunting some of us to come participate in public service, but also for giving us the opportunity to grow and to serve the nation. He has a speech here, which I will read proudly. The speech started with a quotation from one of our elder statesmen, the late Chuba Okadibo. He was famously reported to have said, if you are emotionally attached to your tribe, religion, or political leanings, to the point that truth and justice become secondary considerations, your education is useless. Your exposure is useless if you cannot reason beyond petty sentiments. You are a liability to mankind. This is a very thought-provoking remarks as to the role of a citizen in his society and in his nation. Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, esteemed journalists and editors, ladies and gentlemen, it is both a privilege and solemn honor to deliver this lecture in memory of late Alhaji Lateef Kayode Jakande, a journalist, public servant, and a patriot. We gather not merely to celebrate a life, but to renew a purpose. The purpose of journalism in the service of nation building, especially in our richly diverse but often divided society. Let me begin by commending the Nigerian Guild of Editors for sustaining this important tradition. Your commitment to dialogue and remembrance is not only noble, it is necessary. Your commitment, as evidenced by this event, is quite commendable. Gatherings like this must be encouraged and institutionalized, for they allow us to learn from our past, reflect on our present, and chart a course for our future. The immortal power of the press. The history of Nigeria is in many ways the history of its journalism. Long before we gained independence, it was the Nigerian press that laid the foundation for our freedom. Men like Ahmad Macaulay, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Anthony Enahoro, just to mention a few, did not just write editorials. They steered the nation's consciousness. Azikiwe's West African pilot bore the profound motto, show the light and the people will find the way. Others followed. Bisi Onabanjo, Saad Zungu, Bob Ogwagu, Mapugo Okoye. These are all names that should not merely be remembered, but be taught in every school of journalism. These were journalists who became leaders not by switching careers, but by extending their service from the newsroom to the nation. Indeed, there is hardly any profession better suited to train future public servants than journalism. For the journalist is trained to listen, to investigate, to challenge power, and above all, to serve the public interest. That was the philosophy of Alhaji Lateef Jakande. As a governor of Lagos State, his journalistic values became governance values. Simplicity, honesty, accessibility, and efficiency. Jakande governed with the pen. Jakande governed with the pen still in his heart, even if not in his hand. Even when he served under General Abacha, a decision that drew sharp criticism and even scorn, he endured it quietly out of a deep belief in unity, nationhood, and the possibility of service in difficult circumstances. That experience is a reminder to all of us that sometimes history judges not by the noise of the crowds, but by the integrity of the motive. I can relate to that experience personally. In 2010, I moved the doctrine of necessity motion in the Senate, a decision that allowed Vice President Goodluck Jonathan to assume presidential powers at a moment of constitutional uncertainty. The backlash was fierce. My constituents accused me of betrayal. Petitions to recall me were circulated like wildfire. Yet, I knew that the path of nation building often runs through the terrain of misunderstanding. In that moment, I understood something deeper about Jakande's own legacy. Journalism under fire, then and now. The Nigerian press has endured and resisted oppression in many forms. Under colonialism, it fought for independence. Under the military rule, it fought for democracy. Under both, it paid dearly. We must never forget the dark years when newspapers were proscribed and journalists were detained and some imprisoned. For example, African Concord in 1992, Champion newspapers and Vanguard in 1990, The Guardian in 1994, and the Sunday Magazine in 1995, just to cite a few examples. All silenced temporarily, but never conquered. It was a time when pen were confiscated, but not courage. A time when truth was a dangerous act, but it was acted upon nonetheless. Today, the threats are different but no less insidious. The digital age has opened the floodgate of information and misinformation. Social media has democratized speech but also diluted truth. Artificial intelligence now creates headlines, but who checks the heart behind them? And then there is the corrosive influence of big money. Politicians, corporations, and special interests now compete to own narratives, not just policies. Editorial independence is constantly under siege, and the temptation to trade truth for access is greater now than ever. Yet, the challenge is not only external, it is also internal. Some media houses like the institutional discipline to be the watchdogs they aspire to be. Young journalists are often exploited, poorly trained, and handed a pen without principles, as rightly remarked earlier on by Jibai. You cannot promote ethics in society if your own house is in disorder. Journalists must not only write truths, they must live it, like all of us. The veterans must mentor, the institutions must reform, and we must invest in civic education, media literacy, and training that equips the next generation with not just tools, but with a mission. Journalism's role in nation building. Let me be clear, journalism is not just about reporting events, it is about shaping the nation's soul. Part of the role that journalists play in the society include, among others, defend the rule of law. The moment a society begins to ignore judicial decisions, it is on the path to lawlessness. No nation can survive selective justice. The media must call out every instance where court orders are flouted, not because of who is involved, but because of what is at stake, the soul of the republic. And when conflict brews, let dialogue, not denial, be our first response. And as someone trained as a lawyer here, if I may remark on this comment by my boss, following the rule of law is not just the responsibility of judges or lawyers. The journalists have an important role to play in shaping and educating the society regarding their rights and how these rights are enforced. And whoever violates these rights or ignores the decisions of the court, I think the journalists and the media have a responsibility to call that out and to speak against it. Number two, demand credible leadership. Journalists must question every candidate, scrutinize every promise, and highlight integrity over popularity. Elections should be contests of ideas, not identities. Leadership must never be reduced to entitlement. Number three, champion national reconciliation. Nigeria must confront its past. We can no longer sweep historic grievances under the rug. A truth and reconciliation summit, dialogues, conversations, led in part by the media, will help to heal our wounds. Number four, promote civic education and language inclusion. The journalist has a responsibility to encourage, though not mandate, the learning of Nigerian languages outside one's own. Understanding each other is the first step toward knowing each other. And I'm happy to say, as someone who attended law school here in Lagos, it has given me the opportunity of understanding the diversity of our country. So promoting this inter-ethnic, inter-religious dialogue and conversation is key towards bridging the gaps that exist in the society. Number 5, begin with housekeeping. The media must fix its own broken windows. Exploiting interns, holding opportunities, turning a blind eye to corruption within, this must stop. The pen must remain clean to remain powerful. Why Nigeria must not fail? It is true that today we are confronted by many challenges exacerbated by globalization and by poverty. But despite these challenges, we must strive to keep our nation as one and to strive for bridging the inequality that exists, especially in our urban cities. Our survival as a nation is not optional. It is imperative. Number 1, our size gives us leverage. We proudly